Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Christy Clark, Financial Associate with Thrivent Financial, part of the Palm Beach Associates Group. My office is located here in Boca Raton, Florida, and I know we have people signing in from all over, which is a nice feature about this Zoom capability. We can all be together remotely. This evening, we have Tomasina Williams. This is her third time joining us, and it's been wonderful the past two presentations, and I'm really looking forward to tonight. Tomasina helps families develop connected and capable stewards who lead through tensions and transitions without fracturing the family. She's the founder of Sanafka Legacy Advisor, sorry, and developfamilyleaders.com. You can find her. Tonight, we're going to be learning about a five-part framework designed to help us stay grounded, composed, and connected when family tensions are high. And I'm sure a lot of us this summer will be traveling around and visiting family. So I know she's going to provide to us some good tips that will make these family visits even more enjoyable. So thank you so much for being here this evening, Thomasina. I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to join you all again. Thank you for those who have joined us. I was having a little technical difficulties earlier, so I want to apologize if the screen isn't perfect the way it was the first two times. But we'll go ahead and get started. If you joined us previously, then you know that I like to start these sessions with 60 seconds of what I call an arrival practice. Oftentimes, we're rushing from meeting to meeting. You may have been rushing from work to get home, and we don't take time to just settle, just to breathe. So, I'm going to invite us to take just 60 seconds. I'll be timing it on my phone here. The purpose, again, is just to settle your nervous system. If you'd like to lower your gaze or close your eyes, whatever feels comfortable for you, take a few deep breaths and just kind of settle in. Allow whatever you were doing before to be in the past, and whatever you have to do after this to wait for the next, I guess we're down to about 52 minutes now. So I will start the 60 seconds timer now. And that is 60 seconds. Thank you for that. Excuse me. Tonight, our focus is going to be talking about these four default patterns that I talked about in the prior sessions, and then what you can do to actually lead yourself in the midst of the storm. Imagine this, if you will. Think about a spouse where there is some challenge that they are not on the same page about. It might be something having to do with estate planning. One spouse wants to do one thing, the other spouse wants to do something else. They don't quite know how to work through their challenges. What will happen sometimes is to ease the discomfort of the tension between them, they'll focus on one of their children instead. Maybe they're trying to decide whether their children should get equal inheritances or whether one child who has less financial resources should get more. What will happen sometimes is that the couple will then direct their energies to that child rather than the differences between them. Sometimes this can escalate so that other siblings may think, well, why is that child getting all of the attention? I'm doing everything right. And yet my parents don't seem to be nearly as attentive to me and my needs. So that starts to create tension between the siblings. And then maybe the in laws will get involved, or one of the parent siblings will get involved. And you can see how things get very complicated very quickly. And the question becomes, what do you do in that situation? Out of frustration, do you reach out to a friend of yours and start venting to them, or maybe ask them to mediate somehow? Do you pull away and kind of withdraw? Are you the person who tends to maybe get very defensive and argue? Maybe you decide to step back and allow your spouse to just do whatever the spouse wants to do. Any of these are perfectly natural human reactions. They're what humans do whenever we feel like there's something that is threatening us in some way, whether there's some kind of tension that leads to discomfort. Those different options that I just named constitute default patterns. One, triangles. I'm going to mention all four of them, and then we're going to go into each one in depth. And then I'm going to give you an opportunity to see what these look like in everyday life by doing a self assessment. After we do the self assessment, then we're going to get into the 5 point strategies or practices that you can use to relieve tension in relationships rather. So the first pattern is triangles. The second one, over and under functioning. Next is conflict, and then distance. The thing to know about these patterns is that they are automatic. They happen in an instant, which is why it makes it so difficult to talk to loved ones. We're very sensitive creatures rather, excuse me. And our brains are constantly scanning for threat. So if I think one thing and I think my spouse thinks something else, I may be reluctant to say anything because we don't like disapproval. Humans want to belong. We want people, especially our family, to approve of us. We want to feel that we're safe and secure. We want certainty. We want to know what is going to happen. When there's uncertainty or some sort of upset in any of these arenas where I'm not quite sure whether my parents approve of my new love interest or the decisions I'm making around my career, sometimes we withdraw and it creates tensions in the relationships. If my cousin invites my sister to lunch and doesn't invite me, my threat radar goes off and I start telling myself all kinds of stories. What? They're not inviting me? Why wasn't I invited? Does my cousin like my sister better than me? And then we start to automatically, without really thinking about it, start telling ourselves stories. We start filling in blanks. I decide for some reason my cousin doesn't like me. I'm now upset with my sister who's colluding with my cousin, I think. I decide I'm not going to invite either of them to the girls' movie night out this weekend. And then I go to my mom and I start complaining that they've excluded me. I totally forget about the fact that my sister is an attorney. And I forget that my cousin, who has a significant leadership role in a company, the company is embroiled in some sort of legal dispute. I don't know what it's about, but I know it's causing my cousin a lot of stress and concern. It doesn't occur to me that my cousin wants to talk to my sister, who is a lawyer, about this legal situation her company is involved in. It has nothing to do with me. My cousin and my sister aren't even thinking about me in this instance, but yet I've told myself this whole story. And by deciding to not invite them to the girls' movie night out, I've distanced myself from them. By reaching out to my mom and complaining about my mom, I've now created a triangle between me on one side, my mom on the other side, and then my sister and my cousins on the other side. This is what happens in relationships. This is how we automatically, instinctively, without thinking about it, get ourselves into troubles in relationships because we can't figure out how to have conversations and ask questions rather than making assumptions. And because it's uncomfortable that we don't know what the response might be, sometimes we don't respond at all. So I'm going to go through these patterns one by one. And as I said, I've created an assessment. I'm not able to drop that in the chat for you, but I have it here on the screen. I'm going to show you section by section. And then after this, Christy and John will share with you the assessment. And you'll be able to take advantage of that and use it repeatedly. As I go through the through the patterns, I want to invite you to think about whether you recognize any of these situations in yourself, perhaps, or in your family. You might even recognize them in a social group that you're a member of, in a church organization, or a sorority, or at work. Then after we do this, we're going to save some time at the end for Q&A, and I'm going to share also some resources if you want to go deeper. Before we jump into patterns, I want to invite you to imagine an iceberg. We know from science now that the part of the iceberg that we can see, the proverbial tip of the iceberg, is only about 10% of the mass of the iceberg. The 90% below the surface is what is driving what is happening on the surface. And anybody who saw the Titanic knows that the part that sank the ship, what was happening below the surface, it wasn't what they could see. These four patterns that we're focusing on tonight are below the surface. They're hidden below the surface so that we're not consciously aware of them, but they're driving everything that we can see. And so, the first point I want to invite you to think about, to remember, is whatever you see going on above the surface in a relationship, if there appears to be conflict, if there is some sort of tension, just remember that there's something going on below the surface. That something are these patterns that we're going to talk about. The other thing to think about with regard to these patterns is that they are passed down from generation to generation to generation. I refer to them now as the other inheritance, the part that no one realizes exists, partly because it's below the surface. The way that your family currently handles tensions is more than likely very similar to the way that your parents handled tensions and challenges. And they did more than likely what it was that your grandparents and that generation did. If you can think about these patterns as multi generational, it's helpful in that it depersonalizes whatever is going on. It's not just that my sister and I are in a conflict, but this is what happened between my mother and my aunt, between my grandfather and his brother. They are patterns that are passed down so that it's not, again, just a personal thing. It's also no one person's fault. We have been socialized to want to blame somebody, want to attribute fault to someone. But the fact that families are systems, which is the third point, means that there's really no end and no beginning. The patterns that have been passed down across generations are simply the ways that our families have learned to interact. And what makes them a system? Think about a baby's crib and a mobile hanging over the crib. No matter where the baby touches the mobile, the entire thing moves. All the pieces are connected. That's what makes it a system. And the pieces more than the sum add up to more than the sum of the parts. Families are very much the same way. We are as separate as fingers on the hand, but still connected as a unit. This is where the patterns come in, and they are predictable. So if we know what to look for, it helps us to be able to guard against tensions and to know what to do when tensions do arise. And if you think about the fact that families are a system, it also raises the question of agency and lets you know that you actually have more ability to impact what happens within your family than you realize. Because, like that mobile over the baby's crib, one person can make a difference by virtue of what they do, and it ripples across the entire system. So, again, I'm going to invite you to not only think about these patterns, but think about where they fit in your own family. And I will also just warn you that it would be highly unusual if anyone did not see themselves in these patterns. They are how humans are neurologically hardwired. We all fall into these patterns at some point. And when I say all, I mean all. Myself, my family included. There's no escaping them because we are humans. And this is how our nervous systems are wired. So, with that, I want to move to the first pattern, which is triangles. Triangles are considered the building block of a stable relationship. Why? Because whenever there's tension between two people, they will impulsively reach out to a third person. They're not stopping to think about it, it's just what they're doing to ease the discomfort of the tension that exists between them. Triangles aren't good, they're not bad, they just are. They're everywhere. The first triangle happens between us and our parents. A classic example I like to use: child wants a cookie. Mom says, no, you've had enough cookies. No more cookies for you. What does a child do? Instinctively runs and asks dad, Dad, can I have a cookie? And if dad is not thinking and not paying attention, dad will likely say yes without stopping to consider whether the child may have asked mom or what mom might say if the child asks. And that is how our first triangles are formed. Triangles also tend to uh, multiply. So let's say dad says yes to the cookie, mom finds out, mom is now upset with both me and dad because mom knew she told me no, and she's upset that dad didn't ask her first before he responded. So mom might then tell her girlfriend, and now a second triangle, an interlocking triangle, has formed. Triangles tend to um, occur in three different ways. We resort to triangles to either mediate. This is a classic example here where perhaps two children are constantly bickering. Mom steps in to mediate rather than allowing the children to try to work it out amongst themselves. This sometimes happens when couples, like my earlier example, may have a difference of opinion about what to do related to their finances or their estate planning. And they may want their wealth advisor, their financial planner, to come in and mediate between the two rather than the two trying to figure it out on their own. The second way that triangles forms is by taking sides. I have a client who the other day got a call from her granddaughter asking her to pay for an apartment for the granddaughter to be off campus. And the grandmother said yes, even though the granddaughter explained to her that she had actually asked her own mother to pay for the apartment. And her mom said no. She had missed the deadline for campus housing, and her mom considered herself to be teaching her a lesson. So, grandmother knows there's a dispute or a difference of opinion between her own daughter and her granddaughter, and she decides to take the side of her granddaughter, forming a triangle. The third way that triangles tend to arise is as distractions. In the earlier instance I gave, where the couple is not on the same page about inheritance, perhaps for one child versus another, rather than working through that, they focus on the child. And why is it that the child is not as stable financially as the child's siblings? Again, it's a distraction from the underlying dispute between them. So the question to ask yourself when triangles form is, how can I maintain a one-to-one relationship with each person without getting caught between them? This is a classic that happens repeatedly in all kinds of contexts. I want my mom to ask dad this question rather than asking dad myself because I think dad's more likely to say yes to her. What that does is it keeps the two people who aren't communicating directly from developing the ability to work through whatever those tensions are. The person may feel a little bit better temporarily, but it does not resolve the underlying question. And so, what I'm going to invite you to do at this juncture is to go to the assessment. Again, this is a document that you'll get a copy of, but for purposes of this session, I'm going to ask you just to take out a pen and paper. You don't need to write down the entirety of the statements here. Just think about one relationship in particular or one situation as you answer these questions and go through each of the statements one by one. Rate yourself 0 if this rarely ever happens, 1 if sometimes it happens for you, and 2 if it often happens. And I was planning to play a little music, but for whatever reason, the sharing won't allow me to do that. I'm going to give you 3 minutes to take some time and actually run through that, answering these questions to yourself. Just write the number of the question and either 0, 1, or 2. You are not going to be asked to share your responses with anyone. This is solely for your own purposes to help you begin to recognize one, what are scenarios that present triangles? And then what is your tendency? How do you react in the midst of triangles? So I'm going to go ahead and give you a few minutes now. I say a few minutes. It's probably, I'm going to say 90 seconds at this juncture to read through those. And if you don't get through all of them, again, don't worry about it because you'll be getting a copy of this. And once you finish answering, you'll see to the right there, you want to add them up. Give you a few more seconds. Okay. And I'm going to ask you just to hold that number until we get through the other patterns. The next pattern is over under functioning. This pattern happens when, or the over functioning happens when one person takes on more than is their responsibility, and under functioning happens when the other person cedes responsibility for themselves. These parts go hand in hand. There's a reciprocity here. The classic example of underfunctioning is the adult child who, quote, fails to launch for whatever reason, is not taking care of themselves in the way that you might expect. When that happens, you know that there has to be someone, someplace, who is over functioning. Because again, there is a reciprocity that some adult, someplace, is taking responsibility for what this other person really should be doing for themselves. The classic example of the over-functioning person is the so-called helicopter parent who is constantly hovering around the child, doing everything for the child. The question to ask yourself here when you're looking at this situation is, how can I maintain meaningful contact with the other person without either taking on more or doing less than is mine to do? How can I allow each person to take responsibility for themselves? Now, sometimes people who tend to overfunction will frame this as a question of capacity. The underfunctioner can't do it for themselves, when in fact they can, if given the space and the opportunity to do so. It's not about capacity, it's about the anxiousness, the tension in the relationship, not the capacity of the individuals involved. And I'm going to put on the screen the section of the pattern snapshot self assessment that relates to over and under functioning. And I'm going to start my little timer. Keep in mind the same incident or the same relationship that you were thinking about earlier as you answer these 6 questions. Rate yourself on these 6 questions as it relates to over and under functioning, and then total up your score. Got a few more seconds here. Okay, and that is over under functioning. Let's move on to the next pattern, which is conflict. Conflict occurs. This one we think is pretty common, or I should say, pretty clear, rather, what is meant by conflict. A disagreement coupled with emotional intensity. And we know conflict to be some kind of overt, expressed confrontation. You see two people locked in a verbal dispute. What we don't think about as being conflict is the covert type where there's unexpressed disagreement. This can show up when perhaps you have a family meeting, there's a decision that your family has made, everyone leaves the room thinking that you're all on the same page and that everyone agrees because no one said they didn't agree. But there's someone who does, in fact, disagree. They simply didn't express it. The challenge becomes, that person may either begin to unconsciously undermine the agreement that everyone thinks has been made, or if they hold it in, sometimes it comes out on something totally unrelated. The person may blow up over something that kind of throws everybody off because they can't quite figure out what's going on. It's so uncharacteristic and seems to come out of nowhere. Where it's coming from is this prior situation where the person did not express their disagreement. And the challenge here is to think about where can expectations, boundaries, responsibilities, or rules of engagement be clarified. This one is important because oftentimes we think about conflict as being personal, two personalities clashing, when what is happening is there's some tension within the broader family system, some lack of clarity someplace that is being expressed or lodged, manifesting in this particular relationship, but there are much broader implications. Examples here are around expectations with respect to maybe who's going to be the next chairperson of the family foundation, if your family has a foundation, or who will be the next CEO of the family business. This can happen a lot when you have in laws, people who have married into the family who aren't quite sure where the boundaries are, what the rules are of the family they've married into. And so, what seems like a personal issue is often a question of clarifying what is happening, what the rules of engagement are within the broader family system. The assessment here is the same process. Think about the same relationship or situation, review each of the six different statements here, and rate yourself 0, 1, or 2. And we're doing this way because we don't have the opportunity for the interaction the way we would if this call was structured as a Zoom meeting, for example. So I'm trying to give you an opportunity to see what these patterns look like and to what extent you recognize them in your own relationships. Give you a few seconds on this one as well. A few more seconds. Okay, hopefully everyone had an opportunity to complete at least most of that. Again, you'll get a hard copy of this so that you can go over it again, perhaps with a different relationship. I'm going to move on now to the fourth of the four default patterns, and that is distance. Distance, again, seems pretty common sense. It's separateness, any intense emotional separateness. And this is another one where we will be able to determine if someone is pulling away. It's pretty clear that there's distance there. Examples here, I've had clients where someone literally moved across the country to quote, get away from family. That is creating physical distance. But if you are moving specifically to get away from family, there is still some emotional tie there. We can also be emotionally separate from someone and be sitting in the same room with them. People who have distanced emotionally can still share the same household or the same bed. It's not physical, it's emotional. The distance that we tend not to think about is the forcing together. Sometimes we may have a situation where, for example, maybe a mother who insists that all of her adult children and their spouses spend all the holidays with her. She's trying to bring them close together, close to her, but you can't force connection by not thinking about the fact that her sons in law or her daughters in law also have families who they may want to spend holidays with. She is, in essence, forcing those people away from her. It's a paradox to this force, trying to force people to do things together. Sometimes parents may want everyone to do the same thing at the same time in the same way. That is another way of pushing people away, actually, emotionally, because they feel there's no space for them and their own individuality. The question to ask here, if there's a separation, what is one small step that you can take to initiate contact? I've had a couple of cases where young people literally moved across the country to get away from their families. And the parents would simply call, oftentimes didn't get a response, but would leave a voicemail message, just checking in to see how you're doing. Just want to say hello. We love you. That's it. Or send a text message on some special occasion. To do that leaves the door open, even if the other person doesn't respond. It's just a small way of staying in contact. If there is too little room for individuality and people feel as though they need more space, the question becomes, what can you do to create that space? Perhaps rather than deciding where everyone is going to spend a particular holiday, maybe you pose a question and allow others to decide. Again, you take small steps, and these small steps do compound over time. The assessment here, you want to think about that same relationship or situation, go through each of the 6 questions, and rate yourself 0, 1, or 2. Got a few more seconds. Okay. And there you have the four default patterns. I'm going to invite you now to take a look at how you rated yourself. Add up your scores and see which one you have the highest score on. Whichever one you scored the highest simply indicates that this is the pattern where you tend to get caught most frequently, particularly as relates to the relationship or the situation that you thought about. The thing to remember is this does not, however, define you. It's simply a snapshot in time. It's a data point to help you to see the ways in which you automatically respond to tensions in relationships. But it's not static, it doesn't stay there. There is something that you can do about it. If you decide that you want to engage differently, there are a set of practices to help you do that, to help you be more confident and calm, the quiet, as it will, in the eye of the storm. I've created an acronym that I call OPRAS that is designed to help you think about what are the ways that I can manage myself better in these patterns when tensions arrive in relationship. Oftentimes, we tend to want to change the other person or wish they would do something differently rather than thinking about what is it that I can do differently? What do I have control over? Because again, families are systems, and like the mobile over the baby's crib, one person can have an impact on the entire family system by virtue of what that person chooses to do. So if you want to engage differently when tensions rise in your family, the first thing that you can do is simply to observe. The O stands for observe. We can't do anything about a situation that we're not aware of. I encourage people to literally make a research project of themselves. What is it that triggers you? When does this happen? Under what circumstances? What do you instantly do? And the important thing to remember here is to focus on the facts, the who, what, when, where, how, and stay away from why. When we focus on why, we tend to speculate. Judgment creeps in, and that's not helpful. So simply observing, noticing yourself is the first step. Second, the P stands for pause. Everyone has probably heard the saying that goes something like there's power in the pause between stimulus, whatever someone says or what happens that triggers you, and response is your power to decide how you're going to receive that situation and what you're going to do as a result. My favorite example here is I have a client who is a devout Catholic. And what we settled on for her, her favorite prayer is St. Francis of Assisi. So when one of her daughters says something that she would usually snap back at her daughter and things kind of spiral out of control, somebody hangs up, somebody storms out of the room, she has trained herself to catch herself and simply repeat the first line of the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. And she just repeats that to herself over and over again. It calms her down. And when she's calm, it will also calm her daughter down. And then they'll be able to have a reasonable conversation. She texts me often to say, "You'd be so proud of me, Tomasina." I just kept repeating it. And I was calm. And my daughter calmed down. And we were actually able to work through what we were having a disagreement about. You'll figure out for yourself what works for you. The handout that you're going to get will include this and also some further explanations about each of these sets of practices. The R in Oprah stands for reframe. Often we will, again, focus on what other people are doing. My mom didn't do so and so, and therefore XYZ, rather than saying, I have decided I am going to do this or I am not going to do this. This is a matter of simply setting for yourself a set of guidelines about how you're going to engage. And then when you share with people, to share from your perspective, not about what they did. Anytime you say to someone, you didn't do so and so, that person goes on defensive automatically, instinctively again, without even thinking about it. And they cannot hear or process what you're saying. So rather than accusing someone of having misunderstood, for example, you could simply say, I see this differently. You don't have to argue. You don't have to try to convince someone. You can simply plant, I see it differently, and leave it at that. The next letter, A, stands for allow space and grace. I say all the time that it would be such a different world if we could simply love ourselves and other people just the way we are, rather than the way we wish we were or we wish they were. None of us is perfect. We're all trying to figure it out. And I sincerely believe that most people are doing the best they can. So you want to allow space and grace. Be patient with yourself and with other people. And if you can, again, allow a little space, people will ultimately get to where they need to get to. It may not be on your timeline, but they will get to where they need to get to in their own time. And the last letter here is S. And S simply means stick with it. We tend to give up 3 feet from gold, as the saying goes, too quickly. So there you have Oprah's. You will get again a handout that has the self-assessment on it. It will also have Oprah's on the back and a chart with a number of different practices that you can implement to help to lead yourself better when things get a little tense. And the last slide I want to share here, you'll also get as a handout, or it's just a set of resources if you want to go deeper in this type of thinking. This is based upon a teaching called Bowen Family Systems Theory. Excuse me. And the place to learn more about this is at the Bowen Center for the Study of the Family. These are all clickable links that you'll be able to visit the websites. And the books here and articles are also all based on Bowen Family Systems Theory. And with that, I'm going to ask, I know we're right at time. Does anyone have any questions that have been typed in the chat or anyone want to ask before we sign off?
I think this has been so informative. I really appreciate your time and all this great information. Um, I look forward to the self-assessment and the resources that we will be receiving and handing out to everyone? I don't know, like I'm wondering, you said it's not good or bad or anything, but I my numbers with each one, the conflict over under, triangles, the distance, um I f- I don't know. Like everybody's just different, I guess. But is it like you can't say it's good or bad. It's just different,
It's
right?
not good or bad. Again, we have been socialized to think there's something wrong with us when we get
Yes.
into a conflict or when I shirk back and don't want to talk. These are all natural responses. It's not good or bad, it just is. It's information. And the question becomes, do you want to do anything about it? Do you want to engage differently? And if you do, you can do those set of practices and you can model for your family a different way of handling tension. And what a powerful legacy that is to be able to show people there's a different way to do this. I encourage people not, that's why I say allow space and grace for yourself and other people. It's not a competition. We're really just trying to learn more about ourselves, how we are engaging in certain situations, and if we want to do something differently, what are some ways we can work on doing it differently?
Yeah.
No good or
Okay.
bad. It just is.
No, I
And
like
if
that.
you do this, and so the other thing about this self assessment, you may decide to do it with respect to a different relationship or a different
Mhm.
situation. Or
Right.
you may take the handout I'm going to share with people, try some of those practices for a few weeks and see whether it makes a difference. And then do the assessment again. Again, it's all about awareness, understanding what is happening at this deeper level and thinking about how can I train myself to manage myself a little bit differently when these tensions show up. And small steps, they accumulate, they have impact over time.
I do think too, one of the things you said was, oh, we do have a question.
I'm
So
seeing that. How do you go about being patient when certain family members simply won't listen no matter what? When at a certain point, do you pause and distance yourself, or is it best to never take a step back or to be emotionally distanced? I'm not going to say it's never good to do anything. These patterns sometimes serve us very well. I mean, you do need to protect yourself. There are some circumstances, maybe your physical uh, uh, safety or security is at risk, if not emotionally. So there's never never an all or nothing, I would say. The place I think to start is with ourselves. The questioner says, if the other person won't listen, no matter what, candidly, that sounds like you have an agenda. You're trying to convince them to see the world your way. And human nature is that the more you push, the more they push back. The more you push, the more they don't want to hear it. So I don't know the circumstances, but it may be something where you can model for them a different way of doing something that you think that they should be doing. People have to learn their own lessons in their own times. We can't force other people to live life the way we want to. And I think this is one of the places where families get into trouble. We think that just because we were maybe born to the same parents, live in the same household, go to the same church, whatever, that we should think alike. Humans just aren't like that. I'm very different from, I have three younger brothers, and we're all very different. I have a brother who I bought a book for him a number of years ago, uh, and I have a different view about religion than my family, but my family does family prayer every Sunday. And I participate even though I have a different view. One Sunday, I said something about something that reminded me of something in a book. And my brother says, really, say more about that. So I say more about that. And he's like, what's the name of that book again? Ask his wife, who's on the call, to order the book for him. This is Sunday evening. Lo and behold, Monday afternoon, she goes into his home office. She finds a copy of the book. Not only does my brother have a copy of the book is inscribed. I bought him the book 25 years ago. I
Wow.
inscribed it and I put a date in it. And he was, we were both obviously much younger then. He's lived in like three different states. He's packed this book up and carried it everywhere, but never read it. He reads the book and is blown away. To this day, he says to me, "You should have made me read the book. You should have forced me to read the book. How can I force you to do anything?" All you can do is share with people your perspective, but we have to each live our own lives. And think about it. You don't want other people trying to force you to do something. Certain lessons we have to learn ourselves. No matter how much you love your child, you're never going to be able to walk for your baby. That's something they have to learn on their own. So I would just encourage the person who asked the question to think about, what is it that I can do differently in this situation? It could be that that person perceives you as constantly after them and they just can't hear anything you say. What happens if you just back off for a little while?
Mhm.
And maybe they'll come to that same place in their own time. Or
Mhm.
if it's a family member, maybe when somebody else tells them that. I talked to a client just yesterday who was incensed that she's been trying to tell her son something and the son just couldn't hear it. But then some person on a TikTok video said the exact same thing. And the son is now telling the mom. And she's like, well, that's what I've been trying to tell you.
Yes.
Just how we're wired. So we
Mhm.
have to give space and grace and allow other people to get to where they need to get to in their own time. And think about, is there something that I may be doing that that person is unconsciously rebelling against simply because I say so?
Right. That's very good. Yes, thank you for that. And
And thank the
um,
person for the question. I appreciate it. And thank you for staying over. I'm sorry I went a little long. I know it's dinner time for some people.
no. Well, yeah, we've really enjoyed all three of your sessions, and we can go. What was your website again? Where can we find
My
you?
website is developfamilyleaders.com. Developfamilyleaders.com. It will be on the information that you and John can share with folks. The self-assessment, and also the Oprah's, that graphic, and there's a table there, a chart with practices. At the bottom is my website, and you can always reach me through there.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful evening and an enjoyable summer. And hopefully, we can all take with us into our family events over the summer and just this evening at home and this weekend forthcoming as well. These good practices. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christy. Take good care, and thank our listening audience for signing in.
Yes.
Alrighty. Good night.
Right.